Today is a special day at CSA. It's a great day. You know, last week I took some time to go back to basics with all of the churches of Science of Mind throughout the world, really. That first Sunday in January, we go back to the basics. We look at the philosophy, and as part of that, I put a card in everybody's bulletin, and some folks, 33 of you, wrote out questions about the philosophy. And I have asked the most brilliant minds in this church to join me in answering your questions. So if they will come up now, our ministerial staff. Now, I've asked them, these are great questions, by the way, that you had. Unfortunately, you're only going to hear 1-minute answers to them. And if you would like more information, we're all going to be available afterwards. Reverend Betsy will be over under sacred service. Peggy. Reverend Peggy will be under sacred service. Reverend Brynde will be over at the movie table, and Reverend Betsy and Reverend Rick and I will be at the end at the door, so you can ask us other more clarifying points of the questions if you like. But we're just going to stream right through these. So we're going to start with Reverend Brynde. Reverend Brynde, in spiritual mind treatment, must I use I statements, or can we say we?
Yes. The short answer is yes. The long answer is sometimes saying we makes your belief deeper, because sometimes it's easier to believe what's true about someone else than it is about yourself.
Great. Reverend Betsy, how do you demonstrate love without selfishness?
When I saw this question, I was really happy about it because I love going to the Bible. So I found this in Matthew 22. Master, which is the greatest of the commandments in the law? And Jesus said unto them, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and the greatest commandment. And the second is like unto it, Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. A part of this question was, how can you love without selfishness? When we love without selfishness, it means we're moving toward one of the greatest things on earth, and that's the love of God. So the love of God is unconditional. It's self-giving, has no restrictions, and it is greater than all else. And as we move there, we will more fully understand true love.
Thank you. Reverend Peggy, I'm going to ask people not to clap because we only have a certain amount of time. What are the symbols in the front of the stage?
Well, the symbols are actually listed on the back of your bulletin, so they tell you that they symbolize most of the major religions as well as a couple of earth-based traditions. And it's just to remind us that we celebrate all paths to God, because we believe there's one God, and we've all been raised in different countries and different cultures, and different paths speak to us. But the symbol in the middle is a symbol, it's a Science of Mind symbol. It symbolizes life, it symbolizes God and the creative process that we duplicate in our own lives. But it also symbolizes universal principles. And so you could be a devout Catholic and still use Science of Mind universal principles. You can be a Buddhist and chanting all day if you want, and you can still use Science of Mind universal principles. And so that's what these symbols represent to us.
Thank you. Reverend Rick, why don't the services teach more from Scripture?
Well, Science of Mind recognizes all sacred writings as Scripture. But if the question is about the Bible, the Hebrew and Christian Scriptures, Reverend Georgia often refers to them, and I refer to them every time I get up. So we don't read from Scripture necessarily, and I say that I'm talking from 2 Corinthians 2:4, but everything references back because they are universal principles, and truth is truth regardless to the faith tradition.
Amen. Reverend Brynde, affirmations seem to be a thing we repeat. How does that reconcile with spiritual mind treatment, where we let it go and we don't think about it again?
Good luck with that one. So, affirmations differ in that affirmations are a tool that we use to redirect our thinking. We've spoken our word, we've accepted that what we desire is ours, and sometimes our thinking reverts, or we go back to the old default. So you use the affirmation as a way to redirect your thinking and put you back into alignment with that which you desire.
Thank you. Reverend Betsy, how can we only find God through a bad experience like alcoholism or food addiction? If so, that seems sad and that God is mean.
Well, the short answer would be no, of course not. There are many, many paths to God. Just thinking of this spiritual community and then the greater community out beyond, how many paths to God could there possibly be? Well, I can't even imagine. I live in Sonora, California, and I live on a small cul-de-sac, and there's about 14 of us. And each and every one of us, I've talked to everyone about their spiritual paths, and each and every one of us goes a different way on the same path. My daughter found her path through the newspaper. You know, she answered an ad for a job, and the next thing she knew, she was an administrative assistant in a church, and she's still there some dozen or so years later. So there's no limitation, there's no right way, there's no wrong way. Everybody's path to God is perfect. And the mystics have told us through the years that our soul is on a pathway of self-discovery, and ultimately we will all reach our heaven.
Reverend Peggy, how many times must I pray a spiritual mind treatment to get results?
Until you get a demonstration. But we do say that each treatment is complete and done, and we let it go. But, Reverend Brynde talked about affirmation, but we can pray and pray and pray because we're treating our mind. We're reminding ourselves of the truth, that we can have what we desire, that we deserve what we desire, that we're worthy of what we desire, and we just get those kinds of thoughts straight with Spirit so that we can invite in that which Spirit wants us to have, which is what we want to have. And so you pray until you get a demonstration. When we're in alignment with Spirit, we should be able to pray once and it shows up. But we're not, most of us, 99.9% of us are not there yet. But we're working on it.
Thank you. Reverend Rick, how are we applying the mission statement for this year as a community?
First of all, this platform is actually very diverse, along with this congregation, and so is our board. But we tithe to the community. 10% of all the collections from this congregation are actually tied back to the community, and they're not necessarily religious organizations. Most of the time they're not. But there are entities within West Sacramento that are doing good within the context of the community. We feed and house the homeless. We have compassionate ministries, which actually feeds homeless people every week, and I can go on and on and on. We are very well represented in the community, and it is our pleasure to be of service.
Thank you. Reverend Brynde, in Science of Mind, we say that we are not responsible for creating illness, war, or terrible things or events. What is our responsibility, and how do we live out our responsibility?
So we're not responsible for the creation of them, but we are responsible for the way that we respond. And every Sunday we say, everything in our life is either a call for love or an expression of love. And so we work at, that is our work, to be that consciousness of love at all times.
Great, thank you. Reverend Betsy, what are the principles? Is there a list, a class, a book?
Oh, the principles are so wonderful to work with. The principles, in one sentence, it is a truth. It is a truth that is unchangeable. We use principles around here every week in almost every way. But just remember, when we're working with a principle, they are immutable, they have no limit, they are absolute, unchanging, and non-negotiable. So some of the principles that I came up with to share with you today are oneness. We are all one. The wholeness that we are, which Reverend Georgia refers to every week, whole, perfect, and complete. But as you know, she's talking about our essence. Love and immortality, and of course, prosperity and abundance. No, there's not a list, and no, there's not a book.
Reverend Peggy, how does the study of science of mind help my family?
Well, when we change who we are, we have an opportunity to change others, even if we never say a word. Because all life is energy. And as we grow, our energy changes and people pick up on that. So even if we never said anything to our families, there could be shifts in consciousness. We all have our own path, and we all have this gift of choice, and so this path may not be for us, but we can still learn to think positively, we can still learn to treat people with more kindness, and those are the kinds of things that we can, I always think of things as I'm planting seeds. You'll never see my family here, because they all have their own path, but I'm always planting seeds, I'm always talking about positive thinking, or expecting what you want to see. There's little things that you can say that can have a big impact on your family and people, your coworkers, people around you. You can especially have an impact on your children. The children's program here is just phenomenal, and it's just such a good way to start life. I wish that for every single one of us, and one day we'll see that, where we are all using these universal principles, even as children.
Reverend Rick, what are the principles of tithing for us?
The principles of tithing is the spiritual practice that is based on the law of circulation. So as we give, we receive. The tithe is always 10%, and that is agreed upon by every faith group known to mankind or humankind, and it's always been that way for as much as we can tell in recorded history. So it is the way that we actually circulate, we practice and demonstrate that law, and it reveals itself more and more in our life.
Thank you. I'm going to take the next one. Is this teaching about politics? And the reason that I'm going to take it is because I think often I speak of political things, political situations in our life. And so you could, from that, think that we are a church of politics. This church is a 501c3 organization. It is illegal for us to tell you how to vote, who to vote for, or anything like that. But we are an organization of values. And so while I might not stand up here and say, please vote for AB 89 gun control, I may talk about the importance of oneness. I may talk about the importance of us not shooting one another with those kind of rifles that go fast. So no, I'm trying to always keep an eye on myself, because I do cross the line on occasion about talking poorly of some of our elected officials. But we are not a political teaching. We are not a political teaching, nor do we ever teach politics. All right. Reverend Brynde, in Science of Mind, we say we are not responsible for creating illness, war, or terrible things or events. Did I just say that? Okay, forget it. Reverend Brynde, how do I get out of God's way? How do I keep my faith?
Well, first, I don't think you can get out of God's way, because God is love. God is love. And, for me, I would never want to think that God is saying, you're in my way. I always think that if I'm in a place of fear, then I'm not in the awareness of God. Because right where I am, God is. How do I keep my faith in that? We all have momentary lapses of faith. But I know that faith is a spiritual faculty within me that I can build and develop and activate. You can do that. Pick up a book that speaks to you. Turn on some music that speaks to you. Everyone, get a prayer partner. It doesn't matter the style of prayer. It's that someone is holding that space for you. Have your own Sangha, your own community. Those kind of things help you sustain your faith and to grow your faith.
Great, thank you. Reverend Betsy, what does it mean to set an intention?
Boy, setting an intention, we probably all do it. Maybe we're not even conscious of it, but when we set an intention, it's because we are willing to do whatever it takes to have that intention come about in our life. I don't know about you, but have you ever expressed something that you really wanted to do and you were telling your friends and they go, oh, I don't think you can do that. I think you should do something like, a little lesser than that. Well, that's when I see reactions come out like, okay, watch me do this. And so I know that in my life that has happened. When I was much smaller, I was telling my friends I wanted to be a minister. And one of my little friends said to me, you can't be a minister, you're a girl. Ministers are boys. So what we have to do is be very clear on what it is we want, and that intention will take us through life and we'll take it with us. Once you decide, make sure you keep that intention in your affirmations, in your prayers, when you pray with a practitioner, no matter what you're doing, that should be right at the tip of your mind. Because the law of mind is always ready to accept whatever it is we want to give it.
Thank you. Reverend Peggy, what does Science of Mind teach about past lives, life after death, and reincarnation?
Okay. We have a statement called What We Believe, and one of the statements is, we believe in the eternality, the immortality, and the continuity of the individual soul forever and ever expanding. So that's the basis of our belief. We believe that even though we're one with the one, we each of us have an individual soul, and that we're always evolving that soul through our experiences that we have through this life. So, do we have past lives, reincarnation? Science of Mind doesn't say much about that. Ernest Holmes liked to reason things, so he would look at different truths and try and reason whether or not reincarnation might be true or not. He felt coming back to the earth was taking a step back, and that life is always about stepping forward and ever spiraling upward. So he did not believe in reincarnation. But not everybody in Science of Mind agrees on that, and I'm one of them. I believe that there's a lot to learn on this planet. And we can still spiral upward and come back and have ever greater experiences. And I think Ernest Holmes would be fine with that, because he wanted this to be a philosophy that was open at the top, and that we would be open to new spiritual ideas and scientific advances. So that's it.
Thank you. Reverend Rick, how does CSA differentiate itself from Unity and Unitarian Universalists?
First, Science of Mind, ultimate authority, happens to be what we would say principle, and the principle or law. And principle or law, if you can't remember all of them that are in the book, just think love. That is our guiding principle. The guiding principle for Unitarian Universalists is reason. It's a humanistic religion, therefore reason and critical thinking is the ultimate authority. When it comes to unity, that's practical Christianity, and the teachings of Jesus and the Bible is ultimate authority.
Thank you. Reverend Brynde, what prompted you to go into ministry?
Tell the whole story.
When I first discovered Science of Mind, I was feeling very lonely, afraid, disempowered, and I walked into the church, and everybody who was in service was powerful, was loving, was kind, and caring. And they assured me that that was my truth too. And so I just began to take the class, one after the other, after the other, after the other. And then when I decided to go into ministerial class, I made that commitment because I discovered that what I was doing, I was already ministering.
Yes.
And so I simply said, yes, that is who I am.
Great. Reverend Betsy, how do we keep the principles fresh, alive, and potent after several years in this philosophy?
That's a really good question. And the truth is, the principles stay fresh in our life because we change. And when we change, then we come up with what more can I do with this principle? Let's take the principle of abundance and prosperity, for example. So when I was growing up, my mother always instilled in me how to save your money and move forward that way. And so I remember when I had $37 in the bank, and I was so excited. So I almost had 40. And I thought, when I have $40, I'll be able to buy anything I want in the whole world. I will be prosperous. You know, of course, that changes over the years. I mean, we all have those times when we wonder how prosperity is working in our life. But it will change each and every time we make a new goal for our life in the area of abundance and prosperity. Now, the principle of prosperity never changes, but we change all the time. And so each one of those principles will change as we do in our lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Reverend Peggy, why does it take so long to have an answer? How can I stay focused and not give up? Are you sure I'm not too old?
No, you're never, ever, ever too old. I want to say that. You know, we all have times where we feel like, you know, I've prayed and prayed and prayed and nothing's happening. So it's time to take a step back. You know, our opportunities for growth presenting themselves that I'm not recognizing, because sometimes we're not quite ready for what we desire. You know, there's our time and there's God time. And so that's why we surrender our prayer, because God always knows best. The law always knows best. But there's always those limiting beliefs too, those beliefs that maybe I am too old, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy enough, or I don't deserve this, or I'm not smart enough, or, you know, a lot of enoughness going on that can get in our way. And that's why all of the tools that we have here, the prayers, the affirmations, the meditation, they're all so important because they keep us aligned with spiritual principles. And, you know, it says in the Bible to pray without ceasing. And so that doesn't mean that we're walking around mumbling prayers to ourselves all day. That means that we're keeping our thoughts, our words, our feelings, and our actions in alignment with Spirit, in alignment with what it is that we desire. That's praying without ceasing. And when we can do that, we'll be able to make a demonstration.
Thank you. Reverend Rick, aside from personal connection to the divine, does New Thought posit a long-term evolutionary arc to the human earth spirit development?
Yes. Remember, God created everything out of God's self. And as a result of that, there's a cause and effect relationship. Evolution is an effect of involution, Lord have mercy, of involution. So therefore, everything seeks to reveal itself as the highest and best of what God is. Everything seeks to do that. And it is a mechanical action that is a function of the fact that all livingness exists in all things. When it comes to humanity, though, we also have the ability to have choice because we're created in God's image. So yes, what is that ultimate thing? That ultimate thing is that when all things are reconciled together, it will be as God.
Thank you. I'm going to take the next one, and that is, what are our children being taught? We are very blessed in this church to have two very, very skilled curriculum people. One is Mindy Cowan, who works with all of the children who are not teens, and the other is Louis Gonzalez, who works with teens. They submit to me every week their lesson plans. I get them by Thursday. And I will tell you that they are always teaching principle. This week, for instance, they're teaching about the principle of everything is either a call for love or an expression of love, no exceptions. Now that's a heavy principle, but they are teaching it in an age-appropriate way for each of the classrooms, with crafts, with music, with storytelling, and with a whole bunch of fun. So we are very, very fortunate. Parents, every week now on the e-blast, we are telling you what we're going to talk about with your kids. What we're going to teach your kids will be on the e-blast every single Thursday when it comes out. If you're not getting the e-blast, there are forms out there you can fill out, and you can know what it is that we're teaching these fabulous kids. All right, where are we here? Reverend Brynde, Where do you begin in the teaching?
Right where you are. That's the wonderful thing about this teaching, because it's for lifelong. It's lifelong, and continues to reveal itself, the principles will. So if you're new, you could start with Leah's class today. Start with foundations. It starts the end of this month. Once you've had the foundations, you can jump in and take any class, but start where you are. Be of service. Whether you recognize that as not as a teaching tool, it is. It opens your heart.
Great, thank you. Reverend Betsy, what if someone wants material, something material that's not good for him or her, or the people around them, i.e. greed?
Greed. Well, when I saw the word greed, I went to Webster, who says greed is excessive desire for acquiring or having more than one needs. Then I thought about how would that come about, greed. Sometimes I think greed comes from a person because they feel empty. They feel like there's nothing in life for them, or they don't have friends, or whatever it is. And so they fill it up with stuff. I know I have a wonderful friend. He's actually, my mother would call him a shirt-tail relative. And many years ago, he was in that process. He was just accumulating and accumulating everything he could find on this earth. And finally one day, these are his words, he was sitting on his couch having a beer, and he thought, what on earth am I doing? And he moved out of that and into his spiritual walk. And now he still has all the good stuff. He has a beautiful wife and 2 children. And he says, they're all okay and I love them all, but my focus now is my walk with God. So it came out of an emptiness for him, out of a place where he didn't think he was good enough or right in some way. So it can just be a good thing in the long run.
Reverend Peggy, how does meditation fit into the teachings?
Before I answer this, I want to go back and just say, if you have a desire or a demonstration that's not showing up, see a practitioner. It can really help you. Sometimes we have subconscious things that get in the way, maybe something that happened to you when you were 3 years old that's blocking your good. So I just wanted to make sure to say that. So we say that when we pray, prayer is talking to God, and meditating is listening to God. So meditation is vitally important because our lives are so busy. We're always doing, going, and it's so important to take time not only for our own minds and our own bodies' well-being, to take some time to just relax and be in the silence, but it's also a time for us to kind of regroup and connect with Spirit. I don't think there's a class we offer that doesn't encourage and or teach meditation, because we believe in it so strongly. It's one of the most powerful spiritual tools that we have.
Great, thank you. Reverend Rick, what does Science of Mind say about trauma, both early and in early life and later?
You are whole, perfect, and complete at your essence. And anything that we experience in life, whether it's young or old, with God, all things are possible. And it can be overcome. It's just possible to do that because God is within us and we're whole, perfect, and complete at our essence. As we have spiritual practices, we continue to reveal more of God in creation. And so therefore, even though those things happen, it's terrible that they did, you can overcome because with God, all things are possible.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to take the last question, which is, how did CSA get started? I honestly don't have time to even begin the process of answering that question. I will say that starting next Sunday, out in the long table out there in the lobby, there will be an essay as to how we got started, what happened, and why I came to Sacramento, why I decided to start a Science of Mind church, and some of the process that we've been through to get us from the 21 years ago when I opened the church and gave my first sermon, and I conned people from Santa Rosa, my home church, into coming over here so I didn't preach to an empty audience. I'll talk about from that moment until the moment that we're in right now. So that'll be available to you out there next week. Will you join me in thanking these fabulous people? Let's take this message into prayer, and it's just a prayer of thanksgiving, a prayer of saying how grateful we are that the universe always says yes. That God is with us all of the time, that love is with us all the time, that compassion is with us all the time, that wisdom for our next steps is with us all the time, because we are never disconnected from God, from infinite intelligence. I give thanks for that. I release this word into the law, and together we say, and so it is. If you